when immigration issues arise in family law mediation. This is the topic for today.
Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcast. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode. I'm in our series Mediation Tips by Fran. We're today to discuss the immigration issues. I am Natalia Łowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator from Warsaw, Poland.
And hi everyone, I'm Mac attorney, mediator, and arbitrator.
And I'm Fran Brochstein, an attorney and a mediator in Texas.
Immigration is a very hot topic nowadays, and everybody just puts that into every single context and meaning, as we see a lot of frightening and threatening things happening to immigrants in many countries, in the US, in the Polish and Belarus border. So people ask themselves, what happens to me if I am an immigrant? What happens to me if my status is unclear? How does it affect my rights in family? How does it affect my rights in family law? We'll be discussing that and looking at it closer. Please remember, nothing we say here constitutes legal advice. Fran, when you hear immigration in family law mediation, what do you think about? What cases that you had come into your mind?
Well, that's why mediation is so important, because at mediation, the parties are in control. And as a mediator, I often reality test with people. And if two people have children, they are connected for the rest of their lives. And I always encourage people to put kids first and their interests second, and to learn to be negotiable, because you don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, so immigration has always been around, right? The topic. And parents, one being in one country and the other one being in another country, and having a kid together, well, kid has to live somewhere. Those issues sometimes come up and blow up in family cases all the time. For example, let's say I have a father who has a mom who he's married to, who's deciding to leave him, but they're both immigrants. They came from another country, and she wants to take the children, back home. The question that is going to come up is, well, what are my rights? Am I going to be able to see my kid? Am I going to be able to only see my child in the other country? Is there a way I can force her to stay? These issues can be dealt with at the table. Okay. Now, the mediator is not going to be able to go into, conversations about the law in terms of what, the government can do or cannot do, because we don't have much of a choice, right? The government does what it does. But the mediator can help the parents come up with solutions that are specific to that scenario. And in that case that I was just explaining, perhaps the parents will work out a deal where they might share the child equally if the child is young enough and not yet in school. Or perhaps if the child is in school and has to live in one particular location, they'll deal with some kind of electronic access. Or perhaps they'll do a schedule that's going to let the child be in one country to go to school for some period of time, but then during the vacations be in the other country. And so immigration issues come up. They can be dealt with in mediation. It's just up to a good mediator to think of outside the box solutions and try to figure out things that will work for the parties.
Most people think their case is unique. I'm a native Houstonian, and here's the bottom line. Houston is an international city. People come and go, and I have seen So many people marry where they're from two different countries. And unfortunately, if they decide to divorce, that's where it gets complicated. Generally in Texas, if you're a current Texas resident, the judges there want to keep the kids in Texas. I did a case with a gentleman that worked at a major airline, and he and his wife were from England. And in the mediated settlement agreement, we agreed that the wife could live anywhere she wanted as long as that airline flew into that city. That was one of the strangest mediated settlement agreements I've ever done. It worked for that couple because he traveled all the time anyway. So as long as he could fly in and see his kids, he cared about it. Plus, more and more people are using Zoom or FaceTime or Skype to be in touch with their kids. So this world is actually becoming a much smaller place.
And back to the immigration issues, I do believe that a lot of people just think that if they are, let us say, legal, and the other parent is, let us say, illegal, meaning their immigration status might not be clear at this point, or they await a certain immigration status. Some parents might think, okay, my situation is different. It is going to be decisive in my case. What do you think about it? Is it something that is being taken into account? And how do you handle this issue in mediation?
Yeah, Fran, if I could, the issue of one parent maybe using the other parent's legal status against them, that's a card that's played all the time, right? I've seen that a million times. The fortunate thing is usually it doesn't matter, with one big exception. And that is when there is a genuine, credible fear that the child is going to be taken abroad and not kidnapped, but relocated in such a way to deprive the parent who's here from being able to see their child. Look, parental alienation can exist just in many forms. It might exist where two people live in the same city and one of them doesn't let the other parent see the child. But parental alienation can also exist on an international level. And that one is usually the most difficult one, right? And this is where we'll talk about Hague issues later. But this is where one parent will intentionally deprive the other parent by absconding with the child back to another country, usually the country that they're from originally, to hide out and with hopes of just depriving the other parent of rights permanently. Okay, whether or not there's a court order here in Texas or here in the USA. And so I would say the ways you deal with this, you're going to have to go to mediation where you talk about passport restrictions, where you talk about what countries that a child can live in and reside, where you talk about whether or not you're going to have restrictions on what countries you can travel to, not just for vacation, but to go live, where you talk about whether or not you got to get the other parent's consent from being able to travel. So immigration as a whole comes up, but these multi-layer faceted issues can come up and they can be resolved by a good mediator.
Well, and we've all seen the news, read books, and had seen the movies about people that refuse to follow court orders and go into hiding. There just was a young lady I just read this week that's now an adult. Her father took her to Mexico, hid for years. Now she's been reunited with her mother because the U.S. government did DNA testing and determined she was the child that had been missing, I think, for 14 years. And the good news is, I keep hearing that Mexico does not want to participate. And if they find the kid, they will send the child back to the United States if there's a U.S. order. But we've all seen cases and are aware of cases where there are people that take the child and disappear. And unfortunately, many times that child is homeschooled and hidden and given different names and different identities. And that is a form of child abuse. It upsets me a lot when you read about that, because that's just about punishment to the other parent or mental illness.
I do believe that to some people who feel themselves as immigrants and do fear that this immigration status that they don't have currently granted to be the legal status, might be a fear and something intimidating them from taking legal actions where they can be actually appropriate or desired. And in here, I'm saying about child abuse. I'm talking about domestic violence. And my experience shows that in any of those cases, the kid's interest really plays the most important role. And any parent that fears the immigration status should not be fearing taking legal steps towards protection of the child, because this is the most important issue whatsoever. So the whether the mediator, and this is the most important thing, doesn't have a legal duty to report someone illegal status. The mediator is absolutely not someone who is evoked to be the guard of the immigration status of people. Mediation is therefore a safe place to discuss all the issues that are coming into your mind in terms of protecting the children's rights. And again, as Max said, playing this card against any other parent is not going to be an effective method to win your case or to present yourself better in the mediation.
Yes. Fran, I know you've had a ton of experience dealing with contested disputes, but what's your take on what Natalia just said with regards to mediation being a confidential place? So therefore, a parent who doesn't want to talk about their legal status, you can talk about it completely open, right, at mediation without fear that a difficult judge is going to hear any of it. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, what we haven't talked about is the cost of litigation. I have seen many, many times in Houston, in fact, as a personal experience, the mother paid $350,000 in attorney fees. The father paid over $500,000 in attorney fees. And at the end of the day, dad finally won custody. Unfortunately, in that case, the child has been just torn apart. They've spent all their money just fighting. And mediation can save people so much money. And additional, we don't have to follow in Texas the Texas Family Code. I've actually taken it and thrown it out the door and shut the door and said, now let's negotiate. And you look at what's best for mom and dad and the kids. And every family is a little bit different. But again, people that have little tiny babies, like 1 or 2 years old, when I bring up issues of such who's going to have a cell phone, how are you going to do extracurricular activities and things like that, they have a hard time envisioning that. But children are little for so long. Before you know it, they're in school and they've got their own little friends and they want to be involved in things. And so that's where mediation is absolutely the best way to go. It saves people so much money. It's so much more flexible. We can deal with people's fears and concerns where courts deal with the facts. They don't care about your fears.
Yeah, and another thing that people should be aware of when it comes to them feeling maybe intimidated because the other parent is using their status against them is that there are protections that exist, right? Natalia had kind of alluded to this earlier, but typical situation where you might have a mom who's being beaten up by her US citizen boyfriend, and he's threatening her, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to not help you get your papers right. Well, there's already VAWA, or Violence Against Women's Act. There's already immigration procedures in place where you can self-petition if you are a victim of violence and you fear that this person who is using your status against you is trying to control your life, trying to abuse you, especially when it's abusing you and the child. And so just know, if anybody who might be listening or watching out there who has this specific problem, okay, again, this doesn't constitute legal advice, but it is something that you can go talk to any immigration attorney about, that this happens all the time in this country. If you have a dispute with family law immigration and you are concerned about your safety or your well-being, and the only reason you haven't gone to the authorities to protect yourself is because you believe that this person has leverage over you, leverage over over the children, over custody disputes in court, where they're going to just point you out as being somebody without papers. Just know that the law already accounts for it, that there are outlets out there where you can get the help you need in order to petition for yourself based on uh, you being a victim. So it's out there, just got to research it.
And when we speak about immigration, we've already touched on the things that here, from the European perspective, we call the cross-border issues. Again, one parent lives in one country, the other parent lives in another country, or the couple lives in one country, they have properties in other countries, someone leaves and doesn't come back. Many issues where different countries are involved, different citizenship, different immigration statuses of people. Two things that come into our mind, and we legally we call them as the most, we would quote them as the most important issues when it comes to children and families, would be first relocation, meaning relocation of children, which would be legally allowing the kid to go and live in another country, and child abduction, which is like the opposite of the first one, where you take the kid abroad without the other parent's consent, infringing this parent's rights if they were actually performed, or where you retain the kid in the country where the child doesn't live permanently, where the kid doesn't live habitually. And in any event of that, there is, in the case of relocation, there are legal procedures for that. And in the case of child abduction, there is a special international act called the Hague Convention on Child Abduction. And we do deal with a lot of issues that involve that, also in mediation. And please know that those cross-border issues are never easy. They are not easy for the parents. They are not easy for the kids either. There might be different cultures involved, different backgrounds. There might be different languages involved. However, again, mediation serves as a remedy for it all, because you can have co-mediators speaking both languages that are involved. You can have experts that will be introducing certain issues as to showing the perspective of the future living in another country. What do you think about it? Why do you think mediation can be beneficial in the cases of relocation and child abduction?
Fran hit it on the head earlier when she said cost, right? Because it's not just costs of court that we're used to. It's also the cost of travel a lot of times. It's also the cost of time, because sometimes these Hague Convention cases can be kind of long. It's the cost of not knowing what might happen as a final outcome. Because let's admit it, we've all been surprised where a judge rules in a way we were not expecting, right? So that unpredictability is also a cost. It might not be money, but it's a factor that needs to be weighed as a value judgment that we got to take into consideration. So, Fran, what other reasons do you have for mediating and versus for relocation?
Well, I will go back again to flexibility and creativity. Um, I think it's fabulous to expose children to different languages, different cultures. I'm thinking back on all the kids I grew up with that were Air Force brats, and they lived all over the world. And in most cases, they found it to be extremely a wonderful experience in their life to be exposed to all different kind of cultures. I knew a family that lived everywhere from Africa to France to Alaska, and the kids learned something at each place. So mainly, I just find the average family cannot afford the money involved. And Mac, thank you for bringing it up. The emotional investment is something that no one discussed, but that many times what happens is literally the people hit the wall and eventually just will do anything to end the battle, because they're finding out that the only winners are the lawyers making tons of money. They and their kids are suffering. So again, this is why I shifted from litigation to mediation, because I truly feel like I help people, and people that are not, that may be undocumented or even have a criminal history. Mediation is the best route for them to go, because we can address all of their concerns and try to come up with creative solutions. And that's what, to me, as a 30-year attorney, this is fun, to come up with creative solutions. I really feel like I'm helping parents and kids be the best they can be.
Yeah. Before we close, let's kind of go down a short little list of the different creative / flexible solutions you might have, right, at mediation. Especially as it pertains to cross-border disputes or immigration disputes, right? Here's one that comes to mind, and that is exchanges at the airport. How many times have we put that into a mediation agreement? Like, that comes up all the time. Fran, maybe you could talk about that. And then the other one would be agreeing on how the child will travel overseas, because there's concerns as to why parents always want this, some restrictions in there. And a judge might say one thing, even though the judge knows nothing about the people, the culture, or whatever, right, in that country. But the parents can say something different when it comes to how travel should be done. Should the child be accompanied? What age should the travel being done? Who should be paying for the travel? All this. So, Fran, can you speak a little bit about those couple issues when it comes to flexible and creative solutions you've put together over the years?
Well, let's go back to after 9/11. After 9/11, kids did not fly for at least 6 months. I mean, the airlines didn't want to be responsible. The judge didn't want to be responsible. And every child is different. I could see maybe an 8-year-old flying, and that kid would be fine. And there may be a 12-year-old that would have a meltdown. The problem is the flights overseas are many, many hours. If you go to Hobby Airport, where Southwest Airlines flies out of Houston, on a Friday about 5 o'clock, you will see all these little kids with their little suitcases. These are seasoned travelers. They know how to go up and fly up to Dallas or San Antonio or wherever. They are probably the best flyers there are. But those kids have done it so much, to them it's no big deal. It's Friday, I need to go see mom or dad, I'm getting on an airplane and I'll be back Sunday night. I mean, it's easy. But that's why it's so important to focus in on each child, because what works for one kid won't work for a next. And the airlines don't want to be responsible overseas on a big airplane if they have a kid with a meltdown. A steward doesn't have the time to sit there the whole time and hold the kid's hand. So I'm not sure what the best answer is, which is why just talking with the parents is so vital.
Mm-hmm.
And back to flying, some airlines do offer additional service, which is like really protecting the kid from the moment they enter the airport to the moment they're handed over to their parents, which is, but of course, this is something that is additionally paid for, but that allows the kids up as of the age of 6 travel by themselves, just accompanied by the flight personnel. So again, this can be arranged for, but those out-of-the-box solutions where sometimes if people are in this multi-country setup, their family members also have different sort of interests somewhere there. So I've seen agreements saying who accompanies the kid when. So I don't know, for winter vacation, that would be the grandma. For summer vacation, that would be the other grandma. So people who are experiencing that really also need to have their minds open. Another issue which was now seen was the COVID restrictions on flying. Quite a lot of families suffered through that a lot. My international clients who have regular visitations suffered from that a lot. The only thing that they were staying with was actually the video communication, which hurt a lot both the kids and the parents. But again, about out-of-the-box solutions, keeping in touch with the other country where the kid lives in one and the other parent lives in the other is also about keeping in touch with the language and culture. So those mediation agreements should cover how this language will be taught and how this bond with the culture can be continued. In many countries, there are embassies or consulates that organize certain activities. I know that, for example, in Houston, there is a huge Polish community and more than 50,000 people, and there is a Polish consulate, for example, and they do have a lot of activities there. So you can arrange for certain things to remind the kid of the bond with the other country, with his culture, with the family, even if the kid is to permanently live in another country.
Great. Ladies, as we can all see, relocation issues, immigration issues, cross-border issues, these things come up all the time, even when we're dealing with mediation. And so it's up to the folks out there to make the call on whether or not they want a judge to just figure it out or have a seasoned mediator to help them wrestle through it and come up to good solutions, especially now in the age of Zoom mediations, because you can do it from anywhere, right? So, all right, that's it for now for this episode. We're gone over a little bit, but as always, Fran, thank you very, very much. And we will talk to everybody soon.
Have a great day.
The same to everybody. Bye-bye.